wow, people think that, you know what, when you give directions, you have to give these long, detailed directions, tell people everything they're going to do. No, please, no. They will have forgotten what they're starting with by the time you get to the end. Instead, you actually say, hey, here's a purpose. Great. Let me generally share with you what's going to happen. Here's what I need you to do now. It's just these simple things that let people know, okay, here's how I manage group dynamics to get the most out of people, keep them engaged. It's just people often they just don't know. And so, as I said before, when people attend a masterful meeting, man, it's like, wow, that was a great meeting, because so many meetings are so bad and people think they're good.
Welcome to the Strategic Momentum Podcast, the show where we share tips, stories, and advice from progressive leaders on what it takes to break through that business inertia and propel you and your business forward. I'm your host, Connie Steele. In today's workplace, collaboration and teamwork are critical to moving initiatives and activities forward. And to accomplish these objectives and tasks, we often have to schedule and run various meetings to facilitate progress. Yet, we've all been frustrated by 1, the growing number of meeting commitments, and 2, the lack of productivity or clear next steps coming out of those discussions. So what really makes a good meeting that positively affects business outcomes? Today's guest spent his career mastering the methodology and system behind successful facilitation. Michael Wilkinson is the founder and managing director of Leadership Strategies, the #1 facilitation training company in the U.S., and he's the accomplished author of several books on facilitation. Michael preaches the tenets of process and preparation that enable leaders to boost collaboration, productivity, and morale among their teams. Michael is also teaching a 3-hour masterclass at the 2019 Association for Strategic Planning's annual conference that's being held on December 15th in Denver. Today, he gives me a preview of his company's core principles and shares how to avoid the common myths and misconceptions companies have around running effective meetings. Because at the end of the day, facilitation isn't just about running better sessions, it's about eliminating dysfunction and maximizing efficiency to drive your business and its ecosystem forward. We'll start by hearing his career journey.
Well, we're going to have to go back a bit, because if you were to look up the word affirmative action in the dictionary, Connie, you would find my face. I am the classic affirmative action case. I grew up in the projects of DC. Back in the day, the area of DC called Anacostia was the poorest. And to say we were poor, let's just say in our neighborhood, there's an old joke that we're so poor, the roaches eat up all our food. In my family, it was we were so poor, we did not have roaches. And so it was just a different world. And I was a bad kid. We were stealing. I was stealing at the age of 4. We were leaving kids, tying them to trees at night, doing really bad things, leaving them out all night, all that kind of stuff. But then we moved from lower class to lower class to an area called Sea Pleasant, Maryland. And it's a different neighborhood. These kids were building clubhouses. They were having lemonade stands. And that's what we did. And at 12, I got a paper route, which was kind of fun and could earn money sort of the real way, earning money. And so that was great for me. And the Post Building did a wonderful thing. It sponsored interviews for private schools. Any carrier could come down and interview with private schools, and interview with a couple of them, and got into 2 of them, which was great. And so I went on to one of those New England boarding schools, as in coat and tie to classes, graduating class of 50. And in my class, General Patton's grandson, for those who don't know, the Lawares of Long Island, the really rich kids, the Stacks of Greenwich, Connecticut. We had in our yearbook, you know how yearbooks have the superlatives, first to make $1 million, all that. We had in our yearbook already has $1 million, and there were 2 names, if you get the picture. So it was a pretty rich school. I was the only black face. And to say that my test scores were the lower in the group would be the understatement. My test scores were so low, they clearly pulled me up and I took someone's place. But guess what? I graduated 5th in the class, which really said that, was it unfair that I took someone's place? Absolutely. But was it unfair that the schools I was attending weren't capable of preparing me the way I could have been prepared? Absolutely. Now, my mama taught me 2 wrongs don't make a right. But for this kid, it made a difference. So went on to Dartmouth, Ivy League school, great career there. And I remember, and I vividly remember, my senior year when all the other kids were dressing up in their Brook Brothers suits and going to these interviews with what was then Chase Manhattan and Chemical Bank and so on. I sat there and said, that's not me. I'm not interested in making a lot of money. And I'm certainly not interested in making a lot of money for somebody else. So really, what I was most interested in was having an impact on people's lives. So I remember I had my shower experience where I made my decision. I put together my 10-year plan my spring year, my senior year. I was going to become Undersecretary of Housing Urban Development. I was clear that's where I was going because I wanted to have impact on people's lives. Didn't want to be secretary because it's too political. And I knew that the folks in government who were having the greatest impact were those who understood business. So I wasn't going to get a master's in public administration. I was going to get my MBA. So got accepted into Harvard and was on my way. And then had my second shower experience, which was, and I always have been a spiritual person, always meditated and prayed on a regular basis. And in the middle of a shower, just heard as if it was a real voice. In fact, I remember pulling the curtain back thinking, was somebody there? But I heard, Michael, if the most important thing to you is your relationship with me, how is going to Harvard Business School going to help you do that? And it was clear that 10-year plan I had was my plan, wasn't God's plan for me. So literally, I went on a 6-month faith walk because it was, okay, God, do you want me to go off on a mountain and contemplate my navel? Do you want me to become a minister? Do you want me to stand on the corner and say, have you thought about God today? Whatever you wanted me to do, I was open to doing. And it was clear that I got nothing, no words. And my religious factor says, what do? You make decisions. And so I said no to Harvard, said no to quit my job. And on that 6-month faith walk, learned the key lesson, which was, in essence, everyone is called to serve. And what I do today, facilitation, is my ministry. It's how I serve. And so we train thousands of people every year in facilitation skills because we know it makes a huge difference, not only in people's professional lives, but in their personal lives, knowing how to facilitate groups to solutions.
Michael's journey, in many ways, is similar to several others I've had on the show. It wasn't linear, and it definitely wasn't easy. But it was driven by his passion, or in this case, his faith. And that calling led him to build out his own ministry in the most meaningful way he could. Next, Michael shares how his early start in technology helped him develop the systems thinking he uses today in facilitation. What we'll learn is that running better meetings really comes down to methodology and process.
I grew up as a systems person, so was a data processing person. And systems, for those who know systems, everything's around a methodology. So planning is 1.0, analysis is 2.0, and then design is 3.0, programming is 4.0. And in 1.0, you have 1.1 and 1.1.1. So everything's broken down. Well, when I started first as a programmer, then as a designer, then as an analyst, and then planning for systems, and then planning for business, what we learned was that when you normally in systems, you interview people individually. But we learned this thing called facilitation, that if you individually interviewed people, then when you heard different answers, you didn't have to go back and figure out which was right and so on. Suppose you got all the people in the room at the same time and have them together design systems. And so that was the first time I got exposed to facilitation. And it was cool. It was really good stuff. And I remember someone saying, Michael, you're really good at that. And I was like, good at what? This facilitation. I'd never heard the word before. But true enough, it was something. And as you probably know from your own work, Connie, when you're good at something, naturally, you think everyone's good at it. Until you learn, oh, no, you've been specially gifted. And then coming with that systems mindset, when it was time for me to leave Ernst & Young, I wanted to teach facilitation. So I was looking for a facilitation class that I could teach. But you know what? Those classes were all about process. Here's how to facilitate strategic planning. Here's how to facilitate process improvement. Here's how to facilitate team building and quality. But there was nothing that taught you really about facilitation. I was looking for the 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. And so I took my methodology approach, which came from system, and said, let's document the fundamental steps in any facilitation, no matter what you're doing. And so we created what we call the 10 fundamental principles of facilitation. As you can imagine, 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. And under that, you have over 100 specific techniques and strategies that support that methodological process. And so at ASP, in fact, the conference that's coming up, doing a one-day session, a special session that is part of it, we teach a 4-day class called the Effective Facilitator. We're doing a one-day, the 7 separators of facilitation to show people, hey, here's the complete process. And here are 7 key jewels that anyone can use who's doing strategy work or any type of other facilitation for that matter.
That's great. And, it was interesting when you talked about what is facilitation, when you had your first exposure to it, you didn't even quite realize what it was. And, if you were to define facilitation, I think some people may perceive it to be very tactical with that limited understanding of its foundational importance for ultimately effective collaboration and outcome. So if you were to provide a definition, how would you define it?
Facilitation, most people know, comes from a Latin word facil, which means to make easy. Our job as facilitators is to make it easy. So let's define what we might call a facilitated session. First of all, let's be clear. It's a highly structured meeting in which the meeting leader, the facilitator, guides the group through a series of, and here's what's key, Connie, predefined steps to arrive at a result that is, and we use these 3 words, created, understood, and accepted by all the participants. They create it, not you. And because they create it, they understand it, and they walk away with full buy-in. So we believe facilitation, getting people together, creates better answers because you've got people who are impacted by the issue involved in creating the solution. So better answers, often faster because we know how to have great techniques for minimizing dysfunction, getting people quickly to agreement. So better decisions, often faster. And here's the key: higher levels of buy-in and commitment to implementation. And that's what leaders want. They want their people bought in. So you don't get the feet dragging. You don't get here, you're trying to put your foot on the accelerator and you have all these people who don't buy in, so they're hitting the brakes. So faster, often faster, better decisions, and then higher levels of buy-in and commitment. That's what facilitation does.
Getting buy-in so you can make decisions faster is a critical part of why facilitation helps move business forward. Better meetings means better outcomes, and that's beneficial to everyone involved. But why do so many people complain that their meetings are unproductive? What are leaders doing wrong that's causing this dysfunction? Michael explains.
Really, really frightening, Connie, when you think about the number of meetings that happen in businesses. Some leaders spend 30, 40, 50% of their time in meetings. And yet what's happened, and it's frightening, that bad meetings are considered good. I mean, bad meetings literally are considered good. And I'll prove it to you. We do, at the beginning of our classes, we give everyone a 10-question quiz. Just true or false. Simple questions, true or false. So if you guess, you get 50% right. And can we agree passing is 60%? That would be a D in grade school. Less than half the people pass on that quiz. That, for example, we ask them, hey, listen, if you want to start a meeting, or if you're holding a meeting, can you agree that to prepare for it, the 3 most important things are the 3 Ps? It's all about the process you're going to use, the people, and perhaps the problems you're going to solve. And we go, absolutely wrong. The most important thing is missing from that list. It's purpose. That you have to be really clear on purpose right from the very beginning, and then the products you want to create. So people will ask me, Michael, would you come to this meeting? And I'll ask just the 2 questions, really. But what's the purpose of the meeting? And you can see the eyes glaze over. They hadn't even thought about it. Well, then what's the product you want when the meeting's over? So those 2 questions alone would generally eliminate bunches of meetings because you're about to walk into a meeting where the leader isn't clear on purpose and product. And you may find you can eliminate the meetings you go through by asking those 2 questions, because once they figure out the answer, you may find, you know what, I can't really contribute much to that purpose and product. Or that, you know what, that purpose and product isn't really worth the time it's going to take to bring people together just send out a daggone email. That's enough to do it. So we can eliminate meetings that we don't even need. And then those meetings we do have, hey, let's really make them masterful. Let's have a masterful start so everyone's clear on what's going on as we move through the process. Let's have great strategies for minimizing dysfunction. When people disagree, by the way, there are only 3 reasons people disagree, only 3 reasons in the entire world. As long as meeting leaders understand what those 3 reasons are and can really have strategies for addressing them, we're in great shape. It just makes meetings so much more effective.
So why do you think there is this lack of clarity around the purpose and ultimately the end product or the end outcome to begin with? Because if that's one of the key things in which it will determine whether or not it's relevant to have a meeting, why do you believe that is such a struggle for the meeting leader to define in the first place?
And it's pretty clear. And take this meeting that you and I are having now. Think about the time you put into preparing for this, thinking about what you wanted to come out of this, and you took the time to do it. Business, we are on a treadmill. We are just going from one thing to another to another. More times than not, people are thinking about the meeting on their way to the meeting, if they think about it at all. And you know when people haven't figured out purpose, product, and purpose, they will start right at the beginning of the meeting. Good morning, everybody. So let's figure out what we're going to do today. When I hear that, I just groan. Let's figure out. So people often miss planning purpose and product, what they want. But even worse, they will forget about process. So even good meetings, so-called good meetings, you say you need to have an agenda. And that's true. You do need to have an agenda. But that's not what makes the meeting great. Because the meeting leaders figured out for each of these agenda items, here's how I'm going to collect the information I want. Here's what I want to do with it. And so those things, as you think through a meeting, you want to think about it as a video. You want to see what's going on from beginning to end so that you are planning and executing what you planned. We just don't take the preparation time. And that's the comment we get from many people who go through our courses. Wow, I had no idea that I've been poorly preparing for just about every meeting I lead.
As Michael tells us, not having a clear purpose and product are some core drivers of unproductive meetings. So in order to have that masterful start and end to a meeting, it requires spending a dedicated amount of time in preparation mode. Whether it's identifying the participants, understanding their concerns, and even anticipating the group dynamics to begin with, these are all important to be aware of to effectively steer the conversation and minimize dysfunction. But there are other factors that are important to consider, and they are part of Michael's 5 Ps of meeting preparation.
So 1, it all starts with purpose. What's the purpose of this meeting? 2, what's the product we want to come out? And here's what's fun. We break product down kind of into the 3 H's. What do we want people to walk away in their hands when that meeting is over? What do you want them to be able to hold? What do you want them in their hands? 2, what do you want them to have in their heads? I.e., what do you want them to know that they didn't know before the meeting started? And then what do you want them to have in their hearts? I know it's a little soft, but you get the idea. What do you want them to believe that they didn't necessarily believe before the meeting started? So purpose, product, the 3 H's. Then we want to know who are the participants, who are the right people to be in the room to create those products so we achieve our purpose. And then giving these people, what are the probable issues that are likely to arise for these participants as they create the products to achieve the purpose? And then finally, so what's the best process that we should use to address these issues so these participants create this product so we achieve our purpose? And notice, process comes last. Many people, when they start a meeting, even if they do prepare, they go straight to, well, what should our agenda be? We go, wrong answer. First, figure out the first 4 Ps, purpose, product, participants, probable issues, and those things inform purpose, process. I'll say that again. And those things inform process.
We'll take another break here to quickly summarize the 5 Ps Michael has just outlined: purpose, product, participants, probable issues, and process. Here's a summary in Michael's own words from a 2012 article he published on managementhelp.org. The purpose answers, why are we holding this session? The product answers, what do we want to have when we're done? The participants answers, who are the participants and what are their perspectives? The probable issues answers, what are the probable issues that will need to be addressed? And then the process, the steps that will be taken to create the product, taking into account the participants and probable issues. How will we go about achieving the purpose, given the product desired, the participants, and the probable issues we will face? Knowing the 5 Ps prepare you to run the meeting as smoothly as possible. But there are some things that occur in meetings that are inevitable, like disagreements. So how do you navigate disagreements while maintaining momentum in the discussion?
You can imagine people go into meetings going, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Oh, I hope there's no disagreements. Please, please, no disagreements. Because they're afraid of disagreements. And what happens? Someone will suggest something. You should do this. And they're hoping no one says anything counter because disagreements feel uncomfortable. Disagreements get mad at each other. Disagreements, we don't really know how to deal with those. But we know disagreements aren't bad. Disagreements are good. Why? There's a term called creative abrasion. Because if someone says, I think we should do this, that may be a level 3 idea. And we may say, okay, and we'll get level 3. But then someone else says, well, I don't know, because this doesn't address this. And I say, oh, yeah, you know what? That's better. We get to level 5. And someone says, I don't know, because that seems to be missing this. Maybe we could. Now we're at level 7. Someone else says, well, I disagree with that because that can't work because of this. Maybe we need to address something. And then they come up with something even better. They get to 9. So through disagreements, you get better solutions. And so we have a quote we love using in our business. Successful collaboration is simply a series of effective disagreements. That's all it is. Successful collaboration is simply a series of effective disagreements. If you don't know how to deal with disagreement, they will never be effective. And so it's by disagreeing, you get to better solutions in successful collaboration. And so we teach there are really only 3 reasons people disagree. Every disagreement in the world, just 3. And people, we've trained over 25,000 people in our methodology. And people walk in going, you're kidding, right? We have not had a single person say there's a 4th reason. So there are only 3. And part of our role is to, as meeting leaders and facilitators, is understand those 3. Because if you have a level 3 disagreement, try to solve level 1 techniques, you will fail. There's no way level 3 disagreements can be addressed with level 1 techniques. Likewise, level 1 disagreement, try to solve with level 2 techniques, you will fail. So we really focus on understanding what are the 3 reasons, how do you recognize whether it's 1, 2, or 3, and then what are the tools for addressing each one effectively. And so people walk out of the workshops feeling really equipped that they understand. They have disagreements for breakfast because they know how to address them. And that's fun. So let's say level 1 disagreements. And most disagreements we find are level 1. It's where the two people don't have the same information. They really don't. They have different information and they're disagreeing because they haven't shared the same information. And so somebody will suggest, I think we should do this. Oh, that's a bad idea before. No, it's a good idea. No, it won't work because once we get them to, we call that being in advocacy mode, where both sides are advocating for their solution. If you can just get them to shut up and really listen. So ask questions, they move into inquiry mode. And once they go into inquiry mode, if it's truly level 1, if it's just because of information, you'll hear something that sounds like this, Connie. Oh, is that what you meant? There you go. And we know when we hear that, our work is done, right? Because it's a level 1 disagreement resolved because you just had to get the information on the table. It happens so often. Our name for it is violent agreement, meaning they're really agreeing, but they just don't know it. And so we just have to get the information on the table. It's done. Sometimes, though, they do understand each other perfectly and they still disagree. Why? It's often because of different values or experiences. And they value different things. Now, we solve a level 1 disagreement by asking questions. A level 2 disagreement can't be solved the same way because it's not about questions. It's not about the information. It's about values. And so we have a process where you identify the values and then create solutions that combine those values. And you get very, very creative around how you do that. And so you really are getting at moving away from the issues to understanding what are the key values behind those solutions, and then say, can we create a solution that combines those key values? Very creative exercise. When you go through it, you get to some very creative solutions. Now, a 3 disagreement's different from that. So if level 1's about information, level 2 is about values or experience. Level 3 is about personality, past history with one another, or other outside factors that have nothing to do with the issue. They just don't like each other. Whatever one says, the other's going to say, no, no, no. You can't solve that by asking questions. You can't solve that by identifying values because that has nothing to do with the issue. Level 3 issues you solve by taking to a higher source. Level 3 issues can't be solved at this level. It's got to go to a higher source to get resolved. We don't have enough time in a meeting to make these two kissy, huggy, huggy. It's not going to happen.
What's interesting is this tiering and hierarchy that you've articulated with respect to disagreements, where I personally feel that when I've been in meetings too, there isn't always that clarity and knowing how to separate, segment, and identify what's really driving the abrasion, the abrasion that you talked about. And by defining these different tiers, where one is just, does everybody even know the same level of information so you can even get aligned on that, which many times we know that is a challenge. But then the other element of, are they coming from the same place? Again, is there philosophies in also alignment to get to that common viewpoint? But you're right. And that last sort of hierarchy and tier, which is the most challenging, if they just don't like each other, there's more of that personality element. Folks don't always talk about that, and they don't outright address it. That is what's driving the ineffectiveness to get to a common outcome or conclusion at the end of the day. So I love this thinking and this approach to being able to identify what's the root cause of a disagreement.
It's very cool, and people find it very helpful to be able to be listening with that ear. You can go by 2 people disagreeing and you go, level 1, yep, level 1. Are you hearing it? Level 2, level 3. It's just as you're listening to disagreements and you're hearing what people are saying, you can assess very quickly what level of disagreement it is.
You mentioned something that I think is really important. It's this whole notion of listening. Why do you feel that's such a barrier in today's corporate environment? Because when I think about the challenges more broadly, I believe that one of the key issues or challenges is this element of people not being able to listen to each other, or they're unable to listen to each other for some reason.
And I come from a fundamental place that says we all are equipped with amazing abilities. Unfortunately, we pile all this other crap on top of it, and so that we never get to our true abilities. And so it's not so much we have to get things, we just have to let stuff go. And in this case, there are things that get in the way of us listening. What is it is we're in advocacy. We're trying to drive our point home. And even when the other person's talking, we often are thinking about what's the next point we're going to make. So we're in advocacy mode. We're not in inquiry mode. And so think of you, oftentimes in the sales world, we tell salespeople, you need to listen more. Well, that's like telling a bird not to sing, right? Salespeople talk. It's what they do. And people have their positions and they want people to understand their positions. Please understand me. So instead, we give them, instead of saying hey, you need to listen, we give them something to do. And we call it the proactive side of listening. What is it? Asking questions. That's the proactive side of listening. And so we share with people that, hey, there are 9 questioning tools that we want them to use when they're talking with people to move into inquiry mode, to force themselves to listen. Because to ask better questions, you have to listen. And so we focus on not saying, listen more. No, question more, because that forces you to listen. And so we go through questioning strategies that the intended consequence is that they learn to listen better. So instead of improving their listening skills, we get to it by improving their questioning skills. I know it's a little serendipitous, but we try to get there.
By realizing that creative aberration is good, as well as the fact that there are only 3 reasons why people disagree, Michael has now given us a framework to identify and help solve for some potentially contentious situations. But it's also important to remember we have to listen first and foremost so we can focus on being in advocacy mode versus inquiry mode. Does this feel like a lot of information to take in? Don't worry, we have a breakdown of all of Michael's tips and tricks on the show notes for this episode. Just go to flywheelassociates.com/podcast/45. That's flywheelassociates.com/podcast/45. And now we'll take a pause here for a quick word from our partner, the Association for Strategic Planning. In today's increasingly complex society, more and more organizations are engaging in alliances, partnerships, joint ventures, and other forms of active collaboration. They're being pushed to consider the strategic direction of their organizations in the context of larger business and community ecosystems. And that includes everything from big corporations, startups, customers, and competitors to universities, government agencies, and nonprofit entities. Multi-stakeholder innovations are needed to create healthy platforms for future growth. And that is why the Association for Strategic Planning is focusing its 2019 annual international conference on the theme, Strategy and Your Business Ecosystem. The conference is being held in Denver, May 15th through the 17th, 2019. Michael Wilkinson will be presenting a 3-hour masterclass on the secrets of facilitation at the conference. If you are attending or interested in attending, be sure to register for Michael's masterclass on May 15th. For more information, visit the conference website at www.strategyassociation.org or follow the link in the show notes for this episode. Now back to the show. So what other important considerations does Michael have to really break through this ongoing bad meeting inertia?
Let's take some examples. And so let's look at just a few really specific things that happen all the time. You have leaders, don't you, who dominate their meetings, right? They just do that. And they say, no other questions? Great, let's do what I'm saying. And away we go. And so we advise leaders that, hey, you know what? If you speak first in a meeting, more than likely you won't get necessarily the full feedback, the full ideas of the rest of the team, because the team will be focused on, do I align with the boss or do I not? So we tell leaders in the room that your role is to get your people to get their ideas on the table. And once you heard their ideas, feel free to say, hey, I agree with that, or I really have a challenge with this, or please answer and get your ideas out. But we use the ground rule for leaders, 3 before me, that at least 3 people have to speak before you speak. And once you speak, there has to be another 3 before me, 3 before me. So if your voice is dominating the meeting, that's a sign that the group is not moving beyond you. So that 3 before me, because it's often an issue walking into a room. Likewise, there are many dysfunctions that happen in a room. The people who are silent, not participating, the people who are over participating, the naysayers, the people who constantly say no to everything, no matter what it is, the broken record. I know our millennials may not know what I'm talking about, but when back in the day when there were LPs and a record had a scratch on it, it would keep coming back to that same place over and over again. Well, the broken record in a meeting happens also. You have this person, no matter what we're talking about, that's because of this issue. That's because of this issue. They can't get past that one issue. And so we have to have specific strategies for dealing with each one of those selected dysfunctions. So people drop out. What do we do? Well, you could put a person on the spot. Well, Tom, we haven't heard from you. And I can see Tom now thinking, and you're not going to hear from me either, putting me on the spot like that. So we don't do that. Instead, maybe two people before Tom is Valerie and Peter. We may say, well, Valerie, what do you think about this? Great. Peter, let's get your input on this. And then finally, Tom, what about you? One, it doesn't look like we're picking on Tom. Plus, guess what, Connie? He can see it coming, right? And can get prepared with this answer. Simple way. Or with the naysayer, I'll take a second example. The person who constantly says, no, that won't work. No, that won't work. Unfortunately, what we tend to do is fight them. Sure, it will work because of this. And once more, we're in advocacy mode, aren't we? With both sides advocating, and we go, no, move into inquiry mode. When the naysayer says, no, that won't work. There's no way that can work. Move into inquiry mode. And we start with the words, you know what? Tom, you may be right. That may not work. How do we make it better? And you see the naysayers going, because the issue with naysayers is they tend to focus on the problem. We need to take that energy and refocus it on the solution. And oh, by the way, Connie, they may be right. It might not work. But the challenge is we need to get them looking for solutions, not looking for the problem. So we just ask the question, you may be right. And this isn't rocket science, right? It's not, you don't have to get a full degree in facilitation to understand how to actually lead a masterful meeting. But there are some strategies. And first, there are principles, broad principles. Like once you understand the principle, you can create your own strategies. But then we support with strategies. And as you're talking, just to give an example, the principle for, we call it managing dysfunction. There are three principles: conscious prevention, early detection, clean resolution. That's how you manage dysfunction. But then under that are a dozen techniques for doing that principle. So it's conscious prevention, early detection, clean resolution. And so when we think about, all right, when we have someone exhibit dysfunctional behavior, what's the primary strategy? Well, it's simple. Approach privately or generally. Step one. Empathize with the symptom. Step two. Address the root cause. Step three. And then the final step, get agreement on the solution. So we know that that's the way you deal with dysfunction. With the naysayer, they say, hey, I don't agree. We shouldn't do that. Bad idea. Approach privately or generally. You say, you know what? Empathize with the symptom. You may be right. Nice empathy word. I'm not fighting you. You may be right. Address the root cause. They're focused on the negative. Let's move to the positive. You may be right. Let's talk about how to make it better. How would we address that issue? Let's get agreement on the solution, and away you go. Likewise, different example, senior leaders, when they walk into a room, senior leaders, executives, what do they most want to know? What do they most want to know? We know they want to know two things. Why am I here and when can I leave? Right? That's what they want to know. Why am I here? When can I leave? And so in your start of the meeting, you need to answer those two questions. So we say at the start of the meeting, do four things: inform, excite, empower, involve. Start of every meeting. Inform. Why are we here? The purpose of this meeting is, when can I leave? When we're done, we will have created. So in the first 2 minutes, you talk about purpose and product. You inform purpose, then you excite, meaning what's the benefit to them of creating that purpose and product? And if there's no benefit to them, they probably shouldn't be there, or you certainly won't get their full attention. So you've got to get really clear in your preparation, what's in it for the people who are going to be in this meeting. So you inform, you excite, then you empower. What are you asking them to do? Are you asking them to make a recommendation? Are you asking them to make a decision? Are you asking them to brainstorm alternatives? You inform, excite, empower, and then you involve. Right? In those first 15 minutes, you get them involved. Meeting leaders often do icebreakers. Oh my gosh, we hate them. Connie, we hate icebreakers. Hate them. Hate.
So that's another misconception of meetings.
Oh my gosh, icebreakers. Why? Oh, let's just see. We believe every minute in a meeting, because executives, they hate wasting time. So every minute in a meeting should be contributing to either purpose or the product of the meeting. Every single one. So let's have an icebreaker. Let's talk about where you last went on vacation. Now that's a great icebreaker, if we're going to be, the purpose of the meeting is to brainstorm vacation alternatives. If not the purpose of the meeting, leave that icebreaker at home. Oh, I've got one. Let's talk about our most embarrassing moment. That's a great icebreaker. If the purpose of our meeting is to talk about how to deal with embarrassing moments. If it's not, leave that at home, right? It's every minute in that meeting, you are taking time away. And so every minute, everything you do should be about focused on the purpose or product. And unfortunately, most icebreakers are not.
What other no-nos would you say that people commonly do? So you mentioned icebreakers, so that's another misconception.
You're going to start a meeting. What's the first thing you're going to do? Let's review the agenda. Wrong answer, right? Don't do that, right? Because now you're talking about the what are we going to do? You haven't even covered the why yet. Why are we here? Or what are we trying to create? So meetings should not start with the agenda. People often think that you should call on people in order to get their attention. Oh, absolutely not. You're putting people on the spot. You use round robins. That's great. And people know that it's coming. And if you're going to use a round robin, which we often use, always say the person's name who's going to start first before you ask the question. So I can imagine I'm going to say, so we're going to go around the room and we'd like to know in this room, what do you like about the solution and any recommendations for improvement? Okay, let's get started. Connie? And Connie says, what? And so instead it is, no, we're going to start with Connie and go around the room and we're going to answer this question. So you say the name of the person who's going to go first so that now they're listening and they're going to play along. Oh, people think that, you know what, when you give directions, you have to give these long, detailed directions, tell people everything they're going to do. No, please, no. They will have forgotten what they're starting with by the time you get to the end. Instead, you actually say, hey, here's a purpose. Great. Let me generally share with you what's going to happen. Here's what I need you to do now. It's just these simple things that let people know, okay, here's how I manage group dynamics to get the most out of people, keep them engaged. It's just people often they just don't know. And so, as I said before, when people attend a masterful meeting, man, it's like, wow, that was a great meeting, because so many meetings are so bad and people think they're good.
In handling disagreements, non-participants, and naysayers, there needs to first be a clear sense of awareness of the participants in the room and how they're going to react. It's about anticipating the interactivity of the working parts, just as you would any technology system, and then coming prepared with a strategy to direct the outcomes. And let's not forget about the 4 things you need to do at the start of the meeting, which is also necessary to drive engagement. Inform, excite, empower, and involve. Engage with purpose, a purpose everyone agreed on at the start, instead of doing an irrelevant icebreaker. You should be able to answer the why behind every agenda item, making getting buy-in and participation easier. What it really comes down to is facilitating the balance of EQ versus IQ. Though in business, you're not as prepared for EQ. Michael explains why.
Because we do so much work in the technical world, working with IT folks, working with consultant folks, working with analysts, engineers, and so on, we remind them that the soft stuff is the hard stuff. The soft stuff is the hard stuff. And so when you're planning a meeting per se, you can do the hard and definite stuff about, okay, let's get my purpose, let's get my product, let's get my agenda, let's make sure we have logistics right, food in the room. But you really do want to think about the soft stuff, the group dynamics. So we can talk about the process on one side, group dynamics on the other side, the process of setting up and the process of the preparation, the start, and so on. But then there's the people side, the group dynamics. And yes, that's the EQ side. And so we want to equip facilitators with a way of thinking. And we often use personality style models. And we say, in any meeting you're running, you're going to create a meeting that you yourself will want to attend. That's what we all do. But there are other people in the room. If you're an extrovert, you're going to create a meeting that an extrovert would love. But what are you doing for the introverts? And you know what? If you're a detailed person, you're going to create a meeting that's focused on detail. The big picture, people are going to have lots of trouble with that. And so one of the things that meeting leaders need to understand is just have a model for personality styles and have something in the room for everyone. And so we generally say you're going to gear your meeting toward the person who's most influential in the room. So let's say you have someone who's a high driver. Give it to me short, give me the bullet, give it quick. Yeah, that's what you have to do. But you may want to have a detailed appendix for the people who need those details. Listen, we're going to run through this fairly quickly. The details are available in this appendix that everyone has. If you want to go through, and feel free to, at the end, to ask questions. Or if you're a person who is we call them the high I, the person who loves to talk, hey, we're going to design the meeting where we're going to have lots of times where we stop, get input, and so on and so forth, because they're going to love that. But then for those who are, hey, I want it quick, I want it fast, we're going to say, listen, there's an executive summary in the report there, but we're going to walk through one piece at a time, stop and get comments and questions as we go through. So we say in any meeting, you have to have something for everybody. So you have to understand each of those styles, what they need. So you're designing meetings that aren't just for you.
Sounds like it's systematizing the people dynamics at the end of the day.
That's what we're trying to do. One of my favorite, it was meant somewhat as a jab, but I took it as a compliment, came from a peer who actually has become a really good friend. She described our approach as the McDonaldization of facilitation. So we are trying to systematize and make it so that everybody can do it, so that they can understand the pieces, understand the parts. And there is a lot. There are 10 fundamental principles. And we tell people, hey, become proficient one principle at a time, because it is a comprehensive model. There's a lot to it. You may say, I need to prepare better for my meetings. Take that one. I need to start my meetings better. I need to be better at focusing people and keeping people focused. I need to be better at dealing with disagreements. I need to be better at managing dysfunctional behavior. I need to be better at energy. I need to be better at closing. Whatever that is, we say, take it one principle at a time. Get really good at that, and then move on to the next principle, because it is a comprehensive system for facilitating any group.
But by enabling an individual or an organization to understand really the big picture and all the components of this system, then it sounds like that individual is then able to determine where they may be stronger or where they may need to improve upon those elements of this really entire model and network, such that they can alleviate some of those choke points that happen along the way. So it's a diagnostic of, if this is the model, these are the areas where I need to improve in order to ensure there is a free-flowing and efficient system in order to be able to drive towards the effective, product, as you say, that you need to get to.
And we use the term masterful to describe that. And we love it that we are saying, hey, we know these methods create masterful meetings. And your job is just to get better and increase your mastery in it. By the way, you mentioned, you asked the question, some of the classic mistakes people make. There are two others I just wanted to mention, because it's...
Please do.
Yeah. And so you may have been in that session where someone was up front with the pen and someone said something. Let's just say somebody said, you know what, we need to put together a process improvement team. And the person wrote on the board, hire a process reengineering consultant. And you looked and said, that's not what the person said. But that's what the facilitator heard, because every time they put together a team, they hired a consultant, and they just so they literally changed the person's words. Or you heard someone say, you know what, I think we should X, Y, and Z. And the facilitator says, is it okay if I write it this way? In essence, those two strategies are simple examples of disempowering the group. You are literally saying to the group through your actions, you know what, I know better than you. My words are better than yours. And when you do that, when you disempower a group, you decrease ownership. It now becomes yours and not theirs. And the facilitators often don't even recognize that's what they're doing. And you've disempowered a group well when you hear people saying things like, well, I don't really know how to say it, because you've taught them they don't know how to say it. Or you've disempowered a person and other people jump in. Well, what Joe is really saying is, now you've shown other people how to disempower other people. And they're now modeling the behavior that you modeled for them. And so we say it's really important to write first, discuss second. Write what they said, not what you heard. Then get them to correct it. If it's incomplete, you don't fix it, you ask a question. If it's not what you're looking for, you don't fix it, you ask a question. If it's wrong, you write it, then you ask a question and get them to get rid of it. Because now they recognize it's their stuff, not your stuff.
You've also introduced your own bias when you interpret.
Oh, it's amazing. Yes.
You interpret what was being spoken, or you've chosen to interpret the comment in such a way that it ultimately aligns to your specific agenda. So it doesn't come across as objective anymore.
And people often ask, can you lead a meeting? Can you lead your own meeting, really? Do you need to bring in someone from the outside? And we say, well, it's pretty simple if you think about it. If you just did a matrix between knowing the topic, not knowing the topic, and having strong facilitation skills and not having strong facilitation skills. What I prefer is having somebody who knows the topic and has strong facilitation skills. That's the preference. But suppose you know the topic as the leader, but you don't have strong facilitation skills. Guess what's going to happen? You're right. You're going to influence your bias all the time. So if that's the case, probably best to have someone else do it, because it really is. And the last thing you want is someone who doesn't know the topic and has lousy facilitation skills. Let's stay out of that box, definitely. But you really want to have folks who understand the issue, if you can get that. But most importantly, if they're leading the group, the most important skill is being able to really facilitate the group.
As we learned from Michael, facilitation is the science that's most effective when structured around a series of defined principles and processes. Simplified, running better meetings boils down to extensive preparation, effective engagement, and management of the meeting dynamics, while ensuring everything relates back to the main purpose of the meeting, the outcome you're trying to achieve. It's about seeing individual players as a part of the larger system, your business ecosystem, and connecting all the pieces so that they align and collectively work together to accomplish the greater goal. And that takes a lot of emotional intelligence, which has to be learned through experience. Michael will be back in the next episode to talk about specific use cases and examples of how to manage and solve for these situations. To connect with him in the meantime, visit his company's website at leadstrat.com or view his profile on ASP's website. Thanks for listening to the Strategic Momentum Podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, leave us a review. This is what helps others find the podcast. And don't forget to follow Strategic Momentum on Facebook and Instagram. I'm Connie Steele, and you've been listening to the Strategic Momentum Podcast.